How do we turn our basic website into something like this? Well, the answer to that is through cascading style sheets, or CSS. CSS are the rules that tell an element what to do. For example, I can tell the page to turn all headers red, or maybe green. How about turning text red? Pink? Regardless, you can do so much with CSS, as to changing fonts, the background styles, etc. The possibilities are endless.
Okay, so I want you to take a good look at this. Do you remember how it looked like before? It was way prettier. Like, do you see this?
Okie dokie artichoke, now that you know what CSS does, aka make the page so much prettier with styles and colors, etc., let's go ahead and create our CSS file.
We can name it main.css or default.css, style.css. It doesn't matter, it's your CSS file. Before we get into editing that, let's learn how CSS works. So CSS works by associating rules with HTML elements. CSS rules contain two parts. We have the selector and the declaration. For the example that I show right here, P is our selector, while everything within the curly brackets is our declaration. So what this is saying is take every single element that is a P element and make the color of those text hot pink. I mean, that's how all things should be. Like, hot pink is such a nice color. Okay, maybe not everything should be pink, but if you did want it to be pink, I can show you how to do that. I mean, okay, let's learn all about selectors.
Through utilizing different types of selectors, we can efficiently and effectively go about styling our HTML page. So the first element or selector that I'm going to show you is the type selector, which is also known as the element selector. Basically, it targets all of the HTML elements that you want to go about changing. In this example, I want to change all P elements or paragraph elements to hot pink. But nothing is stopping you from changing the headers to pink or the buttons to pink. Here I've put together some of the elements or tags that you can go ahead and configure, but don't feel limited to just these. Next up, we have the universal selector. So remember how we changed every single text to pink? Well, you can now do that by using the universal selector, which is denoted by the asterisk symbol. With great power comes great responsibility. Use it wisely. The next type of selector there is the class selector. So the class selector selects HTML elements with a specific class attribute. For example, let's say I had a class that was named raise, for example, my buttons. Then I would declare my rules such as give it this color.
The next type of selector we have is the ID selector. So the ID selector targets specific elements with the associated ID. And the thing about this is you can't have duplicates of an ID. Think about it like this. The government has issued you an ID that's specific to you as well as they did for me. Now that we've learned all about selectors, let's learn how to link our HTML page to our CSS style sheet. At the moment, whatever you put in the main.css file is not going to show up on the index.html. For example, let's say I wanted everything to be pink. We use the universal selector and I'll say color pink or hot pink, right? Okay, now let's go back to our HTML page. If we run this, as you can see, there were no changes made. Now that's because we didn't link the HTML file to our CSS file. So let's go ahead and do that now. First, we're going to want to go into our head and embed or use the tag link. So what link does is it allows authors to link their current document to other resources. In this case, we're going to be linking our CSS file to our HTML file. Now we're going to use the rel attribute to name the relationship of the main.css file to our HTML file. In this case, main.css is a style sheet for our HTML page. So we're going to name it style sheet. Now the next attribute we're going to use is the href attribute, which specifies the URL of what we're linking. So in this case, we're going to be linking our CSS file and we're going to use a relative link because it is within our CSS folder. So just type in main.css and we're good. Now, if we run this, as you can see, everything's pink. Now that you've learned how to link the CSS page to your HTML page, let's learn about specificity. Specificity determines which declaration is applied to an element. think of it like a ranking system or a game. Whichever has more weights or points to it wins. Listed below are the selectors listed in increasing specificity. Now let's go ahead and use that information and learn something. See, everything in here is selected by the universal selector. But if we get a little bit more specific and say, I want all paragraphs text to have the color black, then this is going to win. If we refresh our code, as you can see, black takes precedence over the pink color. Once again, the type selector has 1 point to it, so it wins. Okay, now what would happen if we had two selectors that are identical? For example, let's say I had two P selectors. Which declaration will be applied, the one in green or the one for black? Well, the answer to that is green. The reason behind that is because if there are two identical selectors, the last selector overrides the previous one. Okay, now we still have a long way to go in beautifying our web page. However, we're getting there. Okay, let's mess around with specificity rules a little bit more. Let's say I wanted to grab all of my header 2s and color them pink. Thus, that shall happen. Now, heading 2 is a type element, so it is granted 1 point. As you see here, my About Me header has the ID About Me. So I can go ahead and grab that, and that should take precedence over the header 2 that is assigned hot pink. So obviously there's a bunch of more stuff that we could go over, but this video is getting too long and I do not like that. So I am going to bid you farewell and hope that you learned a thing or two about selectors and what CSS is and the magic you can do with all of this. If you learn selectors, you can become a master at CSS. I'm not a master, that's for freaking sure, but you can be. So anyways, if you learned a thing or two, go ahead and hit that like button, go ahead and subscribe, and if this video was at all entertaining, please let me know or comment what I can improve on, and I shall do that. Without further ado, I bid you adieu!
Please subscribe.